Welcome everyone to tonight's event. Both to those here in person and those watching on Instagram Live. My name's Drew. I'm one of the directors here at the photo studio, and I'm going to be your host for tonight. So we're here to discuss a very important topic that nobody seems to be talking about, and that is, of course, height restrictions in the modelling industry. In recent years, the modelling industry has seen some incredible progress when it comes to diversity, yet height seems to have flown under the radar. The average height of women in Australia is 5'3", or 162 centimetres. Yet to even apply for most of Australia's modelling agencies, you need to be 5'8", or 173 centimetres. And for men, it's much the same. So why do these height restrictions exist? What impact do they have on young people today? And what can we as a creative community do to help overcome them? To answer these questions, I'm joined by a very special panel of speakers. On my far left, we have Dr. Ben Buchanan, clinical psychologist and lecturer at Monash University. Ben conducts research in mental health and body image. On my left here, we have Sangeetha Vipulananda, a signed petite model with Wink Models, and a passionate voice for representation of minorities in the media. Here on my right, we have Taryn, founder and CEO of The Right Fit with Wink Models, and the winner of many business awards, including the Young Entrepreneur of the Year.
And short person to me.
And short person. And former model. And on my far right, we have Nelly Skupatoglu, the former editor.
You said it right.
No, I was going to say name both those hard names. I was like, thank God it's not me.
Former editor-in-chief at InStyle magazine, fashion stylist, and currently social media manager here at the photo studio. So tonight's conversation is going to go for about 45 minutes, followed by around 15 minutes of audience questions. And without further ado, let's get started. So my first question is for you, Taryn, and that's to give us a little bit of background. Why does the fashion industry prefer tall models, and has it always been this way?
Short answer is yes, it has always been that way. Predominantly because clothing sample sizes have always been designed for tall, skinny people. Predominantly because clothes were cut by the couture houses back in the day to hang on a very small, tall frame. And most of the sample sizes in Australian fashion brands and international fashion brands are still a sample size 8. Some will go into a sample size 10, but predominantly they're a sample size 8. And they are cut for a taller build of females. So the fashion and modelling industry was sort of initially designed purely to fill those roles. And models were assigned to be clothes horses first and foremost. So catwalk models or editorial models, models for clothing campaigns. So because of that, models were chosen and signed by agencies based on the work that they would fill for that agent, and that would be as much work as that agent can get them, and predominantly that was in the fashion space. So obviously as we have shifted now to, I like to think a little bit more of an inclusive fashion industry that has plus size ranges and petite ranges. Hopefully we'll see that demand driven from consumers to be more representative in the type of talent that we have in campaigns. But unfortunately, if clothing sizes for samples are continue to be cut in a sample size 8, it's very hard to find models. Models need to fit those to be able to be featured in their campaigns. So
would you say basically the agencies are responding to demand?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think obviously now we see a lot more work for models coming from other sources other than just editorial fashion work, or work that's purely driven by fashion brands. So now as an agent we can be free to sign a slightly more diverse range of talent in terms of heights and sizes, obviously, because there is other work available for them in terms of commercial work and advertising work. But I can understand from a commercial perspective from an agent, if they have 10 gorgeous girls applying to join their books, and guys, they will look at that and say, well, if I can only represent a set number of models per year successfully, because they can only obviously do their job well for a certain number of people, they will say, well, if I know I can get this model X number of campaigns a year for fashion books as well as commercial work, it's a safe to sign that person who is going to be taller and fit in more fashion campaigns than it is to sign someone who's shorter and they will only be able to get commercial work for.
What about you, Ellie? As a style of football, do you see the fashion designers and the brands playing in creating this stuff?
I found myself roadblock many times from fashion brands' requirements, whether it's a commercial like an e-commerce job or an editorial or a campaign. When I'm specifically asked to find someone that is at least 176 meters tall and size 6 to 8 preferably, just so I can use the available samples, even if said brand does cater for sizes bigger than 12, like 14 or 16. They do not usually offer samples for magazine editorials or e-commerce jobs that cover those sizes. Even if they do supposedly cater for them, even at stores, they might just supply with size 12. I don't know if they're disregarding that clientele or if there's not as much demand, but I feel that there is a very strong need to cater for people of my height. Like, I'm only 162, like exactly the median Australian woman, which is like 5'3". And sometimes I look at the campaigns that I style, or like all the campaigns in the magazines, and even though I'm a stylist and I've seen those garments firsthand, I can't be sure if what I'm creating does relate to me, to you, to most of the buying force out there. Other than that, I would wholeheartedly agree with what Taryn said. She definitely covered me in terms of like what the agency requirements are and how that affects a model demand.
And why do you think designers do have such limited sample sizes? Is it a cost-saving thing, or is it an aesthetic choice that they make?
Personally, I feel that designers are see themselves as artists. They are artists, and that creating fashion for them is kind of like an idea imposed by the schools, that it is like an architectural form of interpreting fabrics. So they are convinced that their fabrics and their designs look their best when they're worn by like super tall and skinny people walking down the runway, and that all the poses that they can feature in editorials have to be strictly geometrical. So I feel that it might not be so much, it definitely has an impact in terms of cost, like catering, having sample sizes to provide to creatives and photographers and stylists that cater for shorter people with bigger sizes. But it definitely is very ingrained in them, the idea that the person has to be super tall and super angular when the garments are being photographed. So I feel that's what affects the image that is projected to the audience, and what we are asked to cater for as creatives, as stylists, as photographers.
I think, just to jump into what Nellie just said, I think it's also, as a label starting out, they're desperately trying to get stockist recognition printed. So they can't be that label that's saying, well, sure, I would love you to, include my piece in InStyle magazine, but only if it's shot on a size 12 model. We've only got size 12 samples, so that's all we're going to give you. That stylist is going to go, I get inundated with requests from hundreds of brands. Sorry, too hard basket. And what we see now, especially as you were touching on with e-commerce models, there's so many aggregators of e-commerce brands in Australia, like The Iconic, David Jones, and they shoot hundreds of brands in one day. So if you're the only brand that says, well, our samples all come in a size 12, they'll go, too hard basket, sorry. All of our samples from the hundreds of other labels that we shoot on a day-to-day basis are all a size 6 to 8. Our fit model is a size 6 to 8. You need to meet those requirements for it to be scalable for them commercially.
Yeah.
I have to add something quickly that for
Taryn and Nelly's show now. Everyone else can go home.
I've met, working at the photo studio, so many people, so many beautiful people come in that are, I don't want to say short, but do not fit the height requirements of the modeling industry. People that are my height, even 5 foot, just 5 foot tall people that have the perfect personality. And if you cater, if you find clothing for those people, they will absolutely kill the shoot. And some of those people have gotten signed by major agencies, an example being Kate Moss. She pretty much killed everything, at 5'8" at her time. Then Flavia Lazarus at Duval, a model of color. She's my height. She started shooting 1.5 years ago, and she even walked the runway. I just feel that there is a possibility, and when people see other models that relate to them in campaigns, they become more interested, and they know for sure that they can go and buy that product or that garment just because they see themselves in the model representing them.
Absolutely. So Sangeetha, as a professional model of 165 centimetres, what's your experience, your personal experience been like? And do you feel like your height has maybe limited your opportunities?
Yeah, definitely. With many major agencies, as you mentioned, it's a lot of height restrictions in terms of you have to be 173 or 175 centimetres. The lowest I've seen is about 170 centimetres for the bigger agencies like Giant and Chadwick and so forth. The biggest problem with that is that you don't even have the opportunity to go in and show that you can work hard. You're just stopped at the gate and you can't progress from there. And that's why I see that as the fundamental issue, because I know I can work hard. I know there's a lot of models around me that can work hard and kill the look or kill the campaign that they have set for them, but they don't even have the opportunity to walk through the door and show these people because they're stopped at the gate. And that was my biggest limiting factor. Then other than that, freelancing, a lot of the work is also 175 centimetres, 170 centimetres. You have to have this certain restrictions on how you look and so forth. And that is something that not everyone, a very specific person, is going to fit. And that those measurements are set for that specific person, and after that, there's no diversification or uniqueness in the industry because of that. And that is for mainly the bigger shoots, the bigger editorial shoots, and that's where I see a fundamental issue in the problem, in the height restriction.
Yeah. And Ben, obviously every workplace has its hazards. What are some of the hazards that you see for people entering into the modelling industry?
Well, I think the major hazard that I see in my clinical work, dealing with working with people who have body image disorders and an intense amount of distress, the major hazard is that they haven't internally diversified the basis for their own self-esteem. I think one of the interesting discussions that we're having is about diversity in the modelling industry, and I think that's important. But I think the other hazard that resides within us all is if we pin our self-esteem too much on one aspect of ourselves. And then when we get told, or we look on the websites and say, "Wow, I don't measure up," that can be absolutely devastating. And so I see a lot of that. And the narrower what we define as beauty and acceptable, the more and more people there will be distressed about not fitting that image.
And is this something you see in men as well, or is this more in women?
You bet. So there's more men with anxiety about their height than women. And certainly there are many cases that I've come across in my clinical work where men in particular go overseas to get their legs chopped and lengthened because they are so ashamed and feel so bad that the ideal of manliness they don't measure up to. So height anxiety is, I think it's a thing in men and women, but men in particular. And this is interesting because different sorts of anxiety are more likely in women, like anxiety about weight is predominantly a problem for females, but height's certainly more of a male issue.
And do you think that these height restrictions only affect aspiring models, or do they have a trickle-down effect to society at large?
I think they've definitely got a trickle-down effect. I think that, when thinking about the, in the industry, there's been lots of talks for many decades about BMI, and it's often focused about weight. And I suppose many of these it's now politically incorrect to probably publish on one's website that you have to weigh below a certain amount, I imagine. Do people do that still?
No, in Australia, they don't have weight restrictions.
So because it's politically incorrect, because we've all said, we don't want to be weightist. But with BMI, it is the equation for BMI is weight divided by height squared. And so really, BMI height is half of the equation. So they might be publishing their height requirements as a proxy to BMI, even though they're not probably allowed to say BMI. And I think the broader implications for having people in the model industry that fit a particular mould is that there are so many young people in this country who aspire to look like the models of their favourite brand clothing, or aspire to look like that person on Instagram. And the implications are that there are hundreds of thousands of people, young people in this country, who have incredible anxiety about aspects of their appearance.
So obviously it's a complex topic, and it's not something that can be solved overnight.
I thought that's what we're here to do.
We're here to take the first step. As Ben said, there are other countries, particularly in Europe, that have created laws around BMI in the modelling industry. Do you feel like Australia should introduce more regulation, or do you think that the agencies should just be left to their own accord?
I actually think we're really lucky here in Australia because we sort of value this healthy girl next door beachy kind of look, probably more so than the European market. I think obviously they had come from the really couture houses of the past, and I think here we have thankfully always sort of erred towards that sort of beautiful, especially as I keep saying girls, but girls and guys who are active and outdoorsy. And I think we see that even more so even in like our David Jones and Maya campaigns. There you never really see a terribly thin unhealthy looking model. And with the power of social media, as detrimental as it can be in many, many ways, I think the power of social media is that when you see examples of that, the public and consumers in Australia are so quick to call it out. So if a brand is not using someone who is healthy or representative, they will get so much more negative backlash, I think, in this market than they would elsewhere. So I don't think that we should have hard and fast rules, because I also think BMI can be really misleading as a calculation, and I think you see people being marked as obese by their BMI calculation when they're incredibly fit and healthy and strong and tall. So I think we need to be really careful about putting hard and fast rules on anything, like height as a good example. So I think we need to use common sense, and I think that we need the consumer to be fierce advocates of what they want to see in their advertising, because that's what drives change, and I think Australia is really fantastic for that. We do listen when consumers speak up and ask for things like, I want really good representation in my online e-commerce stores of how this product is going to fit and fall on my body. I can guarantee you, if you are writing that and sending that into the brands that you love to shop from, they will take notice and they will respond to that. So I think no to hard and fast rules about implementing, some sort of, and I think it comes down to common sense as well about age, allowing people on the catwalk or in campaigns that are too young. I think just common sense, and then really listening to a vocal consumer, and as a consumer making sure we stand up and ask for what we want from our brands.
About you, Sangeetha, what do you think? Do you think it should be left up to the consumers to drive the change, or do you feel there should be more regulation?
Not laws per se, but I think it would be more a joint effort of everybody, like agencies, labels, brands, I think it's a joint effort in terms of making a change, because consumers obviously drive the change, but it's the people in power that can actually make the change, as much as the consumers talk. And obviously, as you said, a majority of Australian women and men are under the height restriction of these kind of clothing. So it is a consumer effort in terms of these people coming out and talking, but as a brand you can also use that as a marketing point in terms of, okay, we market for this kind of clothing, we market for these kind of people, because that in itself is a selling point. You've got a whole market of consumers that you can sell to as well.
Everybody shame this person when they walk through the door for being late. Big stares for whoever just pressed it.
So yeah, I think from a brand perspective, that's something they could do. From an agency perspective, obviously, I understand in an agency's perspective. I remember going to an agency and saying I was 165 centimetres, and they were like, I can't sign you because we'll have no work for you. And we want to give work to all our models, which I understand is fair enough. But because of all these changes and this larger amount of work that's coming for people that are kind of smaller, don't have that look, and so on and so forth, I think opening up their books and giving that opportunity, as Nelly mentioned, Flavia is a really good example, and that was because she gave that, she was given that opportunity to really show her work and show that she could walk a runway and go on all those campaigns. I know she was part of a lot of big makeup brands and so forth as well. So it was because she was given that opportunity through an agency that could push her that she was able to do that. And that wasn't a consumer move, that was an agency move. And that's really important to remember.
I think the other, sorry, hijacking this entire event. I think the other really important thing to remember, just as you touched on, is that modelling is so much more than just fashion work. There is so many other verticals. Obviously, there's commercial work, there's beauty work. You know, I'm 160, maybe 3, I don't know, a bit of a stretch, centimetres tall. I modelled for years purely doing commercial work, beauty campaigns. So many of our models at Wink are mature age models or ethnically diverse models who get work because they've really spent time carving out who they are, what they want to be working in terms of campaigns, what they're suitable for, and then building a portfolio of work that matches that. So if you are a petite model, there's still work for you. You're obviously potentially not as much as if you were 175 centimetres tall. But if you build a really, really strong book, you will get those opportunities like Nelly had mentioned. So I think it's really about working out where your strengths lie and building a portfolio of experience and work to match that.
And Nelly, obviously to build a portfolio, you need to do photo shoots, which involves sourcing clothing. What do you think that the designers and brands can do to make clothing sample sizes more accessible to people?
It would be great if there were more sample sizes available, whether that translates into people that are not as tall as the main modelling division is, but do have the potential to model. Say like Flavia, I did Flavia's first photo shoot from her agency, and it was really hard for me. Like, I didn't know. They told me that she was my height, and I was impressed when I saw her model, but I actually had to go into my closet and replace some of the garments that I was given, some of the pants and dresses with my clothing in order to make it work, which was quite like devastating at the time. Thank God it did. But that happens to me all the time. So I feel like, however, when brands see that person, see a person that's interesting, a different look, a personality, like different bone structures, people of color, people from different ethnicities, it's happening a lot lately, and Australia is one of the trailblazing countries in that aspect, thankfully, but still there's like miles of work to be done. I feel that it lies upon creatives as well, because a lot of what brands want their look to feel like comes from editorial work that they see in magazines, comes from completely creative photo shoots that photographers come up with, stylists come up with, creative directors come up with. And I feel that when it's not a paid shoot, when it's something that will get submitted to a magazine but does get a lot of exposure, when we have the ability to take a person that does not necessarily abide to those requirements, that can be shorter or bigger or missing a limb even, like it doesn't really matter, but they do have the personality to embody an idea that we have, that we should use that person, and that we should try, whether we're a photographer, whether we're a stylist, that we should try to create something to open our mind and be more accepting. And then I feel that the brands will follow. And if we put the requests in and if we ask for it, I feel that change will come. It lies heavily upon the brands and the labels. I have to say that, because if we don't have anything to work with, then nothing will come of it. But if we start pushing, and if consumers start commenting on editorials and on brands and asking for someone that looks like them is featured, so someone that looks like them models those garments so they know what they're buying, I feel that things will change. But it has to be a collective effort.
Absolutely. And I think we've identified what aspiring models can do and what designers and creatives can do. We've seen in recent years a lot of agencies opening new divisions in curved models and classic models. What's your take, Taryn, on agencies actually opening a petite division?
Yeah, I mean, we've never carved ours out as a specific petite division. Maybe we should for marketing, you know, so that people can actually go and find them really easily. I think it's great. I mean, I obviously think diversity in the portfolio of talent we represent does us the best service for our clients, and that's what we're here for. We're here to make sure that both our talent and our clients are getting the best service from us possible, and that means giving our clients the access to the best and broadest variety of talent they can possibly have. So, but equally, as Sangeetha touched on before, it is really important for us. We can't just sign models that we don't think that we can get work for, because that would obviously not be doing anyone a great service. So I think it's really, really important that brands can quickly and easily come to leading agencies or platforms like The Right Fit and find talent that they're looking for. So whether that is curved talent, plus size, you know, a really, really broad range of ethnicities and skills and heights, I think is really, really important. So definitely something, and we definitely see so much more of it than, you know, 13 years ago when I started Wink. There was definitely those hard and fast rules of size 6 to 8 for females, over 175 centimetres tall, 6'1" or taller for men, size 32 inch waist. Like they were the hard and fast rules. And now, and no tattoos. And now it's like everyone has a tattoo. Tattoos are welcome. So, you know, so many of those things have changed. And you would have seen agencies had maybe like one token person of a mixed ethnicity. Now, almost all of the campaigns we work on definitely have diverse ethnicity, which I think is a fantastic first step in the right direction. And definitely a mix of ages as well, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ben, what are some of the personal steps that you've talked about already that people can take, do you think, when entering into this industry, which is obviously an industry based on image and aesthetics, largely? What do you think are some of the personal steps they can take to maintain healthy mental health?
Yeah, good question. Drew and I were talking about this the other day while Drew was on a construction site, and like any industry, there's hazards. So on a construction site, you wear a hard hat so you don't get hit on the head. But I think the hazards in the modelling industry, well, they do reside in, you know, the harm can reside in one's head, but unfortunately a hard hat's not going to help that. I think that having people in your life that you know are in your life, not based on what you look like, what brands you have, how cool you are, is a really fundamentally important thing. In my work as a psychologist, I meet people who, for lots of reasons, end up believing that their self-worth is a reflection of what they look like. And the people that I see believe that so much that if they are having a bad hair day, they can't leave the house. And so I think one of the things that we've all got to practice is, well, when we do have a bad hair day, leaving the house, seeing our friends, practicing looking bad, looking uncool around the people that we love and that we know respect us for other reasons. If you find yourself feeling like you always have to look really good even when you're not on the set, then I think that that's a problem.
How about you, Sangeetha? What advice would you have for other people, maybe younger than yourself, that are just starting out? What advice would you have for them?
Do a lot of shoots by yourself. Like, start a lot of shoots and create your own image for yourself. Make yourself unique in your own way and have a voice on what you believe in. Because I gained a lot of what I like, my followers and people that kind of have talked to me, they really connected with me because I had a voice in everything that I had, whether it was diversification in terms of race, height, whatever it was. I always openly talked about it on social media and so forth. I did, most of my shoots were free with people I knew in the community, so most of my friends are part of the community, they're photographers or stylists or whatever it is. I gained that through doing work for free. Like, I didn't expect anything returned, they didn't expect anything returned, and they became my closest friendships, and that became my best shoots. My best shoots have always been the unpaid ones. I hate the paid ones, like, most of the time. And that's because I get to be more creative on it and create a more unique image through it. And that's what agencies want, and that's what other shoots and other brands want. They want to see that uniqueness in you, and that's why they'll choose you for a shoot.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think it's been a good debate so far. So now's probably a good time to throw some questions to you guys. And feel free to direct questions openly or to an individual speaker. Does anyone have any question that want to get started?
Come on,
Don't be
we've got to
shy.
have at least one.
Are you all covered?
It's not a question, it's more like just like a conversation style, but I think as well in regards to like the standard height restrictions and like size bulletin, I think that stops a lot of individuality coming through it and like creativity, and at the end of the day, like, designers are creating something that they want consumers to buy, but I think a lot of the time in society we're constantly thinking about what we want to be like, what we want to look like. Yeah, and then at the end of the day, like, you walk down the street, everyone's doing the same thing. You know, everyone's doing the same thing, everyone is inspired to look the same. But I think that's what doesn't make like the world special. I think like if we increased, you know, individuality and everything like that, like Sangeetha, for example, you know, she's shorter, she is a lot more petite and that sort of thing, but she does so many crazy looks, and even like video doll that's up there, like she's one of our friends as well, and they've got such interesting faces and deserve to, you know, represent clothing brands and things like that, because people want to aspire to be like that as well, you know. So.
I totally agree with what you're saying, and what I really, really love is, and it's one of the reasons I launched The Right Fit, was there was this move towards the creation of online content and people being able to craft their own brand for the first time online. Like, back in the good old days, you would have to go and pay, you know, $10,000 to make a website and, you know, thousands of dollars to, you know, do your branding or whatever. Now you can go and get a logo design on Upwork for like $99 and make a website for free on Wix. And you can craft a brand and build your social followers and get a YouTube channel and tell your story. And those people have become the new media publishing houses. And it's amazing. You know, we've seen the decline of print, and we're seeing these people who are crafting these beautiful online visual identities. And now you see brands clamoring to collaborate with them, whether it is, you know, like the Puma and Gigi Hadid or whatever collection, you know, because she's got such a strong brand for obvious reasons. But, or, you know, these smaller, up-and-coming, incredible creative talent that people are going, wow, I want to work with that person because they have such a strong identity on their own. And I know that they've built this engaged audience that they've crafted over years and years and years. Brands want that now. So I think it's an incredibly exciting time.
I think as well, even with like Maya and David Jones, though, like, I feel like even the glassons and all that sort of thing, they still aren't really jumping on board with like the difference in creative clothing and stuff. And I think people find it really hard to find something that expresses how they feel or expresses, and even with like the lack of presentation and stuff like that as well, I think, it's a massive issue as well.
Definitely. I agree with what you said. I see heaps of Australian brands trying to nail diversity, but sometimes I feel that it falls into tokenism, like pure tokenism, and it's not a real understanding of like the diverse cultural mosaic that Australia is. Whether it comes in different sizes, different heights, or different ethnicities. But there is definitely a market. There are so many people that come here that actually aspire to see a more creative version of themselves, just so they can grasp onto that and embody it themselves. That we're not seeing. We're still seeing like many Australian brands are still focused on the like white, like beach wave Australian type, rather than it's kind of a safe option. But yeah, like, does anyone else have any other questions, or has anyone else? Yes.
So it seemed like a lot of the issue stems from getting brands to actually create sample sizes that are fitting different bodies, rather than just this typical archaic model. How do you think like practical suggestions of how to actually get these brands to realise and invest in creating different sample sizes?
It all comes down to money, ultimately. For those larger commercial 100%. Companies, it all comes down to money. And I've had friends that work in design at Cotton On and those sorts of, and they're trying to do what they're doing, but it's still within those parameters because it's all comes down to the dollars. 100%. To cut a new block. I remember when my kids were little and they introduced Cotton On Kids, and it was like, this is fantastic. And then when they got too big for the size 8 or whatever it was that the kids' range went to, they fell through this gap because they were way too small for the extra small men's. So I said, make a teen range, why don't you do that? And it was purely based on dollars. Now eventually they've got there and they do a teen range. I don't know if that ultimately wasn't really that successful, I don't think. But this is...
I totally agree with you.
It's money and I don't know how to make that change.
Yeah, it's a big commercial risk for a brand, especially in a small market like Australia, where and I think this is what you touched on earlier, and Jason, also to your point, I think obviously as a person in a wheelchair, there was an amazing article. I wish I could remember what magazine it was in, but on fashion that was being designed, a lady that was making a big push for it for people in wheelchairs. And what I thought was amazing is the article was written purely based around the statistics. So it wasn't an emotional article, and what you were saying about the average height being 5'4" or 5'3". If you can go to a brand with logical filled statements and not the emotional tirade that you often see on social media of like, oh my God, like this girl is like not fat enough, we want this person's too skinny or whatever, not tall enough. Obviously brands don't respond to that, but they do respond to dollars and cents. So if you can say, well, actually, you're missing an entire demographic of Australian society, which could actually be valued to, $50, $60, $70 million to your bottom line. These people are not being sold to right now. We would love to help you do that. And a lot of the time it's missing education. They don't actually know that there is this, or they've gone through the process and gone, well, no, we can't afford to cut blocks up to size 8. But then there's this middle market we can't afford to service because there's not enough people or there's too much competition in that market. So I think definitely building a case around facts, dollars and cents, and going to these brands and saying, hey, we understand that maybe you don't know that the average female is this height, and actually there's a missing market here that we'd love you to talk to, or whatever the average male. I have no idea what height is now in men, but
I think it was 5'8".
Yeah. 5'8", yeah. Like can we help you work? We work with Johnny, one of the big men's ranges, and they struggle all the time for male models. I think we're constantly scouring the streets for big and tall male models because they just it's really hard for us to find. So they're out there and these brands are starting to develop. But yes, definitely helping empower them with the knowledge that they need to make the argument to their overlords, the bosses that make these decisions, because they're all, at the end of the day, it all goes to a boardroom and they look at it as a cold, hard bottom line and say, can we afford to make this change? Exactly. So
I feel like a lot of it would also be creating a brand with competition for a smaller, like a shorter person market, because brands are comfortable. If they're making money, they're comfortable. Even you see that in all industries, like IBM had the ability to make the first computer, but they didn't want to because they were comfortable. They were making money from their processes. And having a brand that can actually go out there and be a competition and rock that boat of these bigger brands like Maya and David Jones and make that same money, or they have the ability to break that market and create that change, and that would be a brand like power move in terms of cracking that market.
Absolutely.
I have another question if I can ask.
Of course, that's what we're here for.
So I'm obviously a model with disability, and a lot of what I do is taking those facts and figures, but also on the flip side is trying to empower the consumer to take control. So 20% of the population are people with disabilities, so trying to empower that 20% and then the rest of the 80% to realise that this significant portion is missing. So the same rules kind of apply with petite models. So my question is, I find that most of the population in Australia is super wanting to be inclusive, and they agree with most of the stuff that I talk to them about, but they're not out there doing the do. They're just like, yeah, that's cool, I agree with that, but then go home. So how do you actually inspire them to take that action, to be those consumers who demand better from the brand, so then you get the results?
That is such a good question. that is all good political activism at its core. How do we save the planet right now from global warming? I would love to actually figure out how we get people to separate their recycling.
I don't know. This is a question for someone else.
I feel that inspiration is kind of like a vicious circle. It comes from the brand, it comes from the creative, it comes from people walking down the street, the creative or the designer sees, and they get inspired to create something that or a photographer, a stylist. So it's up to everyone to create. And if they really believe in inclusiveness and diversity, not just to preach about it and say, yes, I'm all for that, but do nothing, but actually come and get that person. Say, me, Nelly, coming and getting you, Jason, and featuring you in an editorial and proving that this can happen. Only by proving that you can do something, that this can actually, that is a viable, that this person can model, this person can represent so many other people that are actually out there, that you can push for change. If it's all theoretical and we're just talking about something that no one gets behind and no one can see, because some people can imagine, but other people would rather see something in order to embrace it or follow it, nothing's going to happen, I reckon. We all have to try and push for it, and when we see it, we need to support it. Not just say, okay, yeah, good job, but not like it, not comment on it, not share it, just let it pass. We have to applaud efforts, either they're being made by brands, big brands or smaller brands, or creatives, or people by themselves, and ask for that change.
I also have this theory, we try and implement this at work, of assuming positive intent. I always try to assume that people, brands especially, they don't know. I think that they're so busy operating in their silos, right? And got to hit next quarter targets. I think genuinely a lot of people would not know that the average height is 5'4", or that 20% of the population have some sort of disability. And I think the more that we can do to educate these people, because they are so busy, and personally I know as a business owner, you're heads down doing this all day. If someone comes into your office and is like, hey, I've got this amazing case for you. Here's the stats, here's the information, and I'm going to help you execute it because you are not an expert in this field. I am. If you came into my office and said that, I'm I'm an expert who can actually help you. I can, use a panel of people together who have disabilities who can help you understand what needs to be thought about in the design process, or, with shorter models, this is what needs to be considered, and this is, fabrics or whatever. that would be absolutely invaluable as a brand or as a, for these bigger businesses. So I think definitely the easier that you can condense that information and then help support them on the journey, I think would be amazing.
All right,
Yes.
I think we've got time for one more question.
2, because there's 2 hands.
Okay, 2 more questions.
You all have to stay.
It's a question. See these brands and they're starting to feature models who maybe like a plus size or larger they have in the past, or they might be a different grades. And they're such beautiful people, and it's like we see that they're using these models to go, wow, that's different than they've had in the past, and it looks like a good look. And like, why do you think that they won't have a model who's maybe 5 foot, or like is different? Like, do you think that'll come next? That they'll also be models who are shorter?
Can I extend that question? Do you think the fact that it's relatively hard, it's an extension of the first, do you think that the fact that it's not as easy to recognise a petite model in a photograph as it is to recognise a curved model or a model of different ethnicity?
Yeah, and
do you think
also
that has to do with
definitely,
the question?
a lot of the time it's about getting, like, especially if you're shooting a group shot, like people that match in heights is super important. Definitely the fact that you can't tell heights in stills campaigns, which is why we always say, especially to petite models, that when we're signing them, it's just to understand the work that you can and can't, expect to get. Obviously, you're probably not going to be walking the catwalks, but definitely in print campaigns, height is a lot less of an issue. So I think it's great, and they will have to make a decision commercially as a brand where they pick their battles at any one time. So, and the last thing, as Nellie said, the last thing you want is an ad campaign that looks like tokenism, where it's like a plus size girl and then a person of different ethnicity and then a petite model and then a mature age model, because then they're going to get just as much backlash for being tokenistic. So I think it's about finding, picking their battles at any one point in time, finding, and the other thing I think from a model's perspective, that when you were talking about mental health before, is just understanding, we see models lose jobs or not get selected as the model. They might have been on hold for a job for the smallest things that you would never ever think of. Like, they only had sample shoes in a size 7 and the other girl was a size 7 and you were 7.5, so they went with her because it's easier. Or that girl's hair was slightly longer and they needed to tie it up in a ponytail and her hair couldn't be tied up in a ponytail, so that's why she didn't get it. So it's, and models obviously don't get to hear that reason a lot of the time, so they think, oh my God, it's me, like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not a good model. But it can be the most obscure reason, that model, lived closer and we were worried about you having to drive for an hour, so we went with her because it's easier. There's so many things, so please don't get hung up on it being always about your height or always about, because it can be a million other reasons.
Taryn, sorry.
Yes.
On that, is it too hard for agencies to then ask for a reason and then feed that back to models? So coming from a mental health perspective, it would be so invaluable for the models to hear, this is the reason.
Yes and no. Sometimes we don't get them. Obviously, we don't always get a reason from a campaign. Sometimes it's also, we understand how hard it is missing out on, coming down to that final 2. Definitely if it's a reason that we feel could add value, definitely. And usually a booker would tell you on the phone, like if they can say, like, the client loved you, they would love you for the next campaign, it's just on this occasion the other girl happened to be able to ride a motorbike and you can't, or whatever it is. I'm trying to think of really obscure reasons I've heard of in the past, because there's so many. Or that girl had freckles and the client's just really hung up on freckles at the moment. They really love freckles, and so even though you're both redheads, you wanted more freckles, whatever. So we hear those stories. So definitely, look, sometimes we could pass it on, and I think sometimes bookers would tell you on the phone. Also, there's that delicate line as an agent of wanting to protect the talent as well, and not necessarily giving, it's not negative feedback by any stretch, but also managing that relationship and making sure that they know that they are supported and that this campaign was just not, and it's almost never a case that model wasn't good enough. That's, otherwise you wouldn't be in the industry.
I think that there would occasionally be really harsh negative feedback though, and so I think which would be damaging. So I think that really highlights the relationship with the people that you're working with closely, and that you know that they can be, that they've got your back and that they believe in you is so important. Because, well, the world's a harsh place and the industry is a harsh place, and so you've got to have people in your corner sometimes who you know value you for what you value yourself for.
There was another question. Yeah.
It's sort of a two-part question, but so obviously we understand the notion of progress, but given that diversity has existed for some time, I mean, Australia is more diverse today than it ever has been, but why do you think now is the time for this conversation? Like, why are we saying now that enough is enough sort of thing? And do you think there's longevity in this, or is it just a trend?
Personally, I feel that we're like, this conversation is part of like the sustainability conversation. It's got a completely different aspect to it. However, there's so much waste in terms of fashion. Fashion is the main industry that's polluting the environment. If we were to convince labels that, say, you as well, Anastasia, whenever we go shopping, we end up buying pants and dresses that we waste at least like 20 centimetres of fabric in length, or 30 centimetres of fabric in length. That goes to waste. Like, I have to cut that out and throw it away. That
I've always said we should
used.
get cheaper clothes for that reason.
That cannot be used. That's waste. And it's not only waste of my money that I pay for to buy something that, say, if it's a pair of wide-legged pants, I'm never going to look like the model's looking just because my pants are not wide-legged anymore. Just because my dress with a like Angelina Jolie leg slit on the side is not that dress anymore. So even if the top looks the same, the bottom is definitely not the same. And I'm the median Australian woman. Like, what about women that are shorter than me? What about them? So we need to convince brands and the industry that this has a variety of implications. It's not just the psychological aspects. It's not just like pushing for diversity and pretending or actually embracing different people. It's about catering to different aspects of the market, and this is the majority of the market. I understand that many of you here are taller than me, but like, we are more than you. We are more like, yeah, we're more than the models. We're like hundreds and millions of thousands. I don't even know if that's an actual number, but we are definitely more than them. Like, why don't we cater for all the people out there that will actually go and buy the product? And I think about it, like sometimes I pass on something that I love just because I'm going to have to spend another $50 or another $30 in amendments and like modifying the clothing. And that's why so many brands that cater for petite are that successful, and they've expanded and they're growing constantly.
But I love sorry, I'm going to let you go just in one sec. But I mean, imagine taking that and being like, okay, Just Jeans, like for every pair of jeans, you're actually wasting $16 in fabric that you could have saved. Add that up over X number of pairs of jeans. Put that in your presentation and take it to them and go. Actually, you could sell. Correct. It's vicious cycle.
I also feel like the route of diversification has started now due to external issues outside of fashion, political issues such as the President of America, first black president of America, started very recently. Even music has had a huge influence. Hip-hop music is now the most listened to genre in America, and that is a mainly black kind of community, African American community, and that has created a lot of diversification in the streetwear community because that's the prominent market. So brands are suddenly like, hey, that's a trend, let me jump on that. Black Panther came out, that's another, I'm not going to say trend, but it was a powerful movie, but also a lot of people jumped on that as a trend as well. So diversification, a lot of brands are using it as a trend, which is sad in a way because diversification shouldn't be diversification at all. It should just be a given. There's a bunch of different
inclusion.
People. Yeah. there's a bunch of people in this room that are different colours, different heights, different races, whatever they are. It should just be every normal day people, because that's who the people that are wearing it. And that's why I worry that, as the question was asked, that it will be a trend, because there is so many people that are jumping on this as a wave rather than jumping on it because they want to make a change.
All right.
Sorry, I think it's also access to information. I think we've got more information than we ever had before. We have more transparency in supply chain. We can actually access the P&L of lots of these global companies, which we couldn't do, a decade before without access to social media. A lot of the online content that we can now access more transparently. So I think that's a big reason for the shift now.
Okay.
And now we're done.
On that note, I think that it's been an amazing conversation and an important conversation. So thank you to all of you four guys for coming along and taking part. But I think the big takeaway here is that it is just the beginning. And let's not make diversity a trend, as Sangeetha said, but let's make it a given. So we're going to wrap up this part of the night, but we will continue the conversation for another hour or so. We've got some food, drinks, got an amazing DJ going to kick off. And it wouldn't be the photo studio without a couple of photographers setting up sets. So we will be doing our pop-up studio tonight. So jump in, have a shoot. We'll be posting the photos or a link to on Facebook tomorrow. And let's get to know each other and continue the conversation. Thanks so much, guys.
I would love to see more of the photos.
Yes.
I get tagged. Oh, thank you. No, pleasure. I was just saying I'd love to see more of the photos. I love them. I get tagged in a lot.
Yeah. You do.
On Insta, which I